everyone. Nice big crowd. I feel like the last host of the year on Saturday Night Live. I am very honored to be here. Tonight, there's a big group of people. I hope I don't miss anybody, but I've got from our Public Relations Committee, Ed, WX2R, Bill, N2COP, Angel, in from Puerto Rico, WP3 Gulf Whiskey, and I don't know if I missed anybody else, but I really appreciate Dan asking me to join the group here. We did, when we were talking about field day, we talked about some public relation items and field day back when it was, we didn't know what was going to happen. We just knew that COVID was going to be a problem. So thank you everybody for joining us, joining me, and I will get started here with my super PowerPoint. All right. So I'm Sid Caesar, November Hotel 7 Charlie, and I will pre-apologize. I know there's a lot of people on here and they thought maybe they were gonna meet the real Sid Caesar. I'm gonna try to be funny. I'm gonna try to keep your attention. If I need some backup, Emma Jean Coca will be coming in from the back room. She's watching Masked Dancer right now on Fox or whatever channel that's on, so she can come in and help me out. And for those of you that might be a little bit younger, Sid Caesar starred in Grease, and he was the star of the whole show. John Travolta was second fiddle to him in that show. All right, first of all, I don't know everybody here. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiar call signs. Some of you still owe me for that 47 gigahertz slow scan contact we had. I still need the QSL card. So a little bit about me, like many of you, I started out with shortwave listening, and I just scared the crap out of my parents. One day I started getting messages from the USSR and China and Canada and East Germany, and they swore that I would get in trouble. Well, I did. I got in trouble, and then I found an Elmer, my Elmer, Rich Bauer, November 9, Delta Kilo Oscar from Wheaton, Illinois. He got me a lot of trouble, and so for 35 or 36 years, I've been trying to stay active and trying to be a part of amateur radio. A little bit about me, I can't keep a call sign, I can't keep a job, so I've got a lot of call signs. I try to be active in my career, wherever I go someplace, I bring the ham radio gear, so I try to be as active as possible. I do like to contest, so I've been on a couple contest stations throughout the country and some other DX locations, and I do a couple special events. This one was at the London Olympics, where I was the wrestling tournament field of play director, and when I wasn't doing that, I was able to get to the special event station to Oscar 1 to Lima. A lot of fun there. Some other places I've been very fortunate, like I said, when I travel, especially for work, when I was with the federal government, that I was able to go to many, many different places and be active on the air. Now, in case my friend Mike Corey, KI1U's on, we have this battle going on. He went to some other school in the state of Mississippi, so I have to make sure that he gets the message. I know what school's #1. All right, I've had a 35-year public safety and federal government career. It started off in the 80s when I was a police and fire and emergency medical services dispatcher in the western suburbs of Chicago. When at the time we had 14 police departments and then 16 fire departments that we dispatched for in a Cold War era nuclear bunker that was designated for the president in case he was in the Chicago area and there was a threat. It had this humongous door that with the press of a button that it would slam shut and you would need a crane to open it up. It was definitely Cold War. I moved on to the police department, Oak Brook Terrace, Illinois Police Department. Went to the fire department, moved to Dayton, Ohio, got really active with Dayton Amateur Radio Association. And as a firefighter paramedic, I also taught school at Sinclair College, which is downtown Dayton. Many of you that have been to Dayton Hamvention, you've seen the school from the expressway, or maybe even stopped by to check it out. Also was on the Urban Search and Rescue team and the Ohio 5 Disaster Medical Assistance team. I retired from the fire department, moved to the federal government where, like I said, I can't keep a job. Those are all the places I worked. Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Department of Interior, all over the place. And then last year I said, that's enough. I've had too much fun after 27 years of federal service. I got to retire. And like many of you that have retired, well, you definitely are more busy when you retire than when you're working. So I'm even thinking about going back because this is just too much work. I get up too early, stay up too late, but oh my gosh, it's fun. All right, just a couple other things. I'm a volunteer examiner. I was the past public information coordinator here in Maryland, where I'm at right now. I've been on the Public Relations Committee, and for the last 3 years, I've been the national chairman. Like contesting, QRP, Straight Key, Century Club, APRS, all kinds of stuff. But Skywarn and weather got me involved with amateur radio. So I'm going to put up a picture of my station, my remote station that I've got in New Mexico, one of the biggest remote stations ever. And that's where I was at. That's where I need to figure out how to hook those up to my handheld so I can talk to everywhere, all the time. A little bit about our ARRL Public Relations Committee. As I mentioned, Bill, Ed, and Angel, and maybe a couple others have popped down from our committee. And we're a group of member volunteers. We serve at the leisure of the president of the ARRL. We're all appointed members. I'm very excited to continue on as the chairman. And although the type gets really small, a lot of it is that we work with the board and the president to make sure that the ARRL's public relations practices and techniques are effective within our community and with outside the amateur radio community. We look at the policies and the decisions of the board, and we work on public strategy to get that information out, like the changes in field day this past year. We work on working with the headquarters and our liaison there, the ARRL communications manager, to work on public relations, public information type campaigns. And we're always looking for other opportunities where we can assist at the club level, the section level, anywhere in amateur radio to help make sure that this awesome message about what amateur radio can do for the general public, but also what we can do for ourselves. It's very important. As I mentioned, some of the members here, Angel, Andy, Ed, Scott, John, Gordon. We've got some help from Carla at headquarters and Bob Interbitson. And then Bill N2COP serves as our board liaison. And we've even got a Radio Amateurs of Canada representative, Alan Griffin. He helps us out. All right, a couple of the important things that our committee does is we have 2 awards that we're responsible for. And throughout the year, you may have seen it in QST, you may see it online, you might see it in your email. The idea of the 2 awards, the McGann Awards and the Bill Leonard Award. The 2 awards, we bring in all the nominations as our committee. We decide on who we're going to nominate. We send that information to the board at either the July or the January board meeting, and they review our recommendations, and then winner or winners are selected. The key here is that the McGann Award is for the promotion of amateur radio to the non-amateur radio community. So it's not a club newsletter, it's not a public service message that's on your repeater, but it's something where the message is to inform everyone else, the rest of the people who have not gotten on board and found some fun facet of the hobby to keep their interest. The other award, the Leonard Award, that's created as a tribute to Bill Leonard, W1SKE, and it honors the professional journalists in audio, visual, and print and text. Little bit about these awards. We have been working on a revitalization campaign, and you'll see that in some of my notes later. But we've really, the number of nominees has really gone down, and we're trying to work with our PIOs and PICs, getting some other additional information to find out why is this. These are very prestigious awards. There are some of our award winners who are part of our committee, and like I said, I can't see all 3 or 4 pages of the participants, but we might even have other folks that have been either nominated or have been selected for those 2 awards. We know that there's some changes, and I'm glad that other members of the committee are on here so we can talk about this in a little bit. But the idea of why we're not getting the nominations is something that we want to change. I did some surveys this past year with past winners, and most of the people that got back to me said that they would do anything to help revitalize the awards. The rest of the people said, well, just let me know what I got to do, but I'm running my business or teaching school or whatever they're doing. But everything was positive when I surveyed the past winners about whether these awards should go on. I feel they're important. The committee feels they're important. So we're going to work hard. You'll hear some more about what we're doing and some calls for getting together to talk more about this revitalization effort. Okay, some of the things that we have been doing. Many people have said, and like I mentioned earlier, during the run-up to Field Day, we were on the call with Dan and a bunch of section managers and other people, and although maybe many had heard of the Public Relations Committee or Public Information Officers, Public Information Coordinators, there really was some confusion as to what they did, or especially what this committee did. So we made sure that we did our best to get out, talk to a bunch of different groups, have a bunch of presentations, even have our own internal meetings with public information officers and public information coordinators. And what we did do is we made sure that anybody who had interest could jump on our calls. We did a series of informational and then field day related calls on video teleconference, and we got a great group, and we found there was all kinds of interest with section managers and assistant section managers and emergency coordinators, a whole gambit. So when we do the outreach this year, although it's going to be titled for public information officers and public information coordinators, everyone who has interest in public relations and public information is definitely going to be welcome. We'd like to hear what's going on. We've got a big country, we've got a lot of sections, a lot of people doing great things, and we need to figure out how that information can get out. So last year, or I should say in a few hours last year, but in 2020, we were working on some of our plans, like a brand new strategic plan for the Public Relations Committee. What is it going to do? What's it going to do in the future? What are some of the initiatives? So we've been working on that. As I mentioned, we did a lot with outreach, whether that was individual outreach or group outreach. That was very successful last year. And then our run up to the 2020 Field Day, that was very exciting. We had a bunch of calls related, conference calls related to that effort. And we mixed up the days, we mixed up the hours. It didn't matter if you were in Hawaii or Alaska or, well, Guam. We might not have done a real good job with Guam and American Samoa, but if you were in the continental United States, there was a call definitely in a time zone where you could make it. So we had great feedback about our being flexible and making sure we knew when our audience was available. We did some other outreach. You may have seen it, whether it was something that was in QST or on the website or some other way, maybe even by email. But we worked very hard to get more information out to help support some of the major campaigns over the years related to amateur radio, and where there was an outreach component. And that included World Amateur Radio Day. Angel had a significant effort in that, especially making sure that all the translations that either he did or that he reviewed were accurate in Spanish, to make sure that we were including our Spanish-speaking amateur radio operators, both in the United States, and a great reminder from Angel that was that field, well, that these activity days, they're just not for the United States. They're either regional wide, or in the case of World Amateur Radio Day, of course, the whole world. Bob Interbitten specifically sent out a bunch of great information about Skywarn Recognition Day from just a few weekends ago. We got some information out there about the National STEM Day, Science, Technology, Mathematics. I missed the E, but I'll get it here in a minute. And then our efforts to promote
engineering.
Yeah, engineering. Thank you. And then in September, we worked very hard with to get the messaging about Preparedness Month, FEMA's Preparedness Month. We also continued some of our efforts from past years, including a board and section manager social media guide that covers some of the basics about social media and how the numbers are for the ARRL in the different social media platforms. And then our continuing update with PR 101, the public relations intro class that we're in the process of updating. And in a minute, I'm going to ask for some comments from some of my committee members, but some of the things that we're going to be looking forward to in this coming year, especially getting rid of COVID, we're going to put another a great effort into promoting Field Day, and especially working with the successes that we've had with some of the club level and section level public information officers and public information coordinators. We're going to kick off, and we'll announce next week when we're going to have some regularly scheduled PIO and PIC teleconferences. Some will have themes, some will be open forums, so that especially new people can get information and get their questions answered. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going to revitalize these awards to make sure that everybody who's a member knows about them, so we can recognize the efforts to earn those 2 awards. A little bit more about PIOs and PICs, public information officers at the section level, selected and appointed by the section manager. They could be for the section, they could be for a club, and they work in coordination and collaboration with the public information coordinator. Now, your screens aren't big enough to put the 13 different responsibilities of the public information on the board, and I didn't want to waste your time with all those slides. It's on the website, but the key is, and one of the things that we're going to look at perhaps this year, is looking at how to streamline the responsibilities, because especially new people, when they look at the public information officer and the public information coordinator position, well, here there are 13 different responsibilities, and some of them are minor things, but most of them are major. There's really no middle of the road. So a lot of people have told us, and we've actually had some people who have come on board and said, my club wants me to be the public information officer, but I quit because I saw those 13 responsibilities and that was too much. So what we're going to do is as I mentioned at the top of the show here, the idea of I was brought into the hobby by an Elmer, by somebody who made sure that I could send the Morse code, that I could pass the test, got me on the air, invited me to my first field day, was there when I made my first Dayton Hamvention trip, there when I bought my first radio, and just all kinds of great things. And I feel that that's important, making sure that no matter what age you are and no matter where your level of competency is with being familiar with and being active in the world of public information and public relations, we want to be there to help people. We want to be there to make sure that the experts that we do have can communicate with new people, get them excited, and tell them that maybe they only need to concentrate on 2 or 3 of those 13 steps so that they can be successful. Public information coordinator, that's the person at the section level and can oversee, if given those duties, of the other public information officers throughout the section. But that's even more daunting. That's got 20 responsibilities. Same thing, people look at the job description and they find something else to do. We've got a large number of people that want to serve. They want to be volunteers and members and help the people of the ARRL and people within the ARRL and our served agencies, but they just look at some of these job descriptions and they just tune out. That's way too much for a brand new person to think about. So same thing, we want to distill it down, figure out which pieces of the 20, or in the case of the PIO, the 13 responsibilities, how we can distill that down so it's just more manageable. And so just a special note that if your club is a special services club, it requires that you have an appointed public information officer to qualify every time that you renew. All right, so what I'm going to do here for a moment, I'm going to ask Bill, N2COP, to say a few words if he's available, and like him to talk a little bit about social media and get us kicked off. And we're just going to have a general conversation about social media and where there's been some success, and talking about some other ideas that might be new to you or your club or to your section. So Bill, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely, Sid, and thank you for heading this up tonight, and thank you, Dan, for inviting you, Sid, and other members of ARRL's Public Relations Committee to address this session tonight. And Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for taking the time here at the end of the year to talk about this. This is a passion of mine, public relations for amateur radio. I have served on ARRL's Public Relations Committee, except for a two-year window of vacancy, continuously since 2005. I was the public information coordinator for North Carolina before I became North Carolina section manager, and now I've been on the board of ARRL as vice director for the Roanoke division, which consists of 4 sections: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. Hams in general are highly proficient people, but we tend to be very modest. And the problem is that modesty translates into many folks not knowing who we are and what we're about. And one of the things that a good PIO needs to do is to try and be the extrovert voice on behalf of local clubs and local activities to ensure that the public in general knows who we are. I've been licensed now for 50 years, and I know up until about 20 years ago, ham radio was something that everybody knew, and part of the appeal was, before the internet, that ham radio was a great way to communicate not only emergencies, but long distance to avoid cellular toll charges. Well, everybody today in America has a two-way radio. This happens to be most people's two-way radios. But increasingly, we're running across that many people in media, both in traditional media, such as reporters, and in social media, people who are blogging, don't really know what amateur radio is. And to bring home the point that Sid has brought up, there are currently 71 ARRL sections. 56 of the 71 have appointed public information coordinators. And those are the leaders that guide their teams within the respective sections. Currently, there are 457 ARRL appointed public information officers throughout the country. And I'm sorry to say that some we just do not hear from. In other words, the section manager appoints the PIO, maybe they remain active for a couple of years, and then their interests disappear. I can name numerous examples where we have had disasters in certain areas, and a PIO has not been part of the response mechanism in describing to the public as to what the amateur radio contribution is to that disaster. And that is how we're known primarily by the public today, not as in the appeal of radio sport, meaning contesting and DXing, but in terms of the general public, in terms of policymakers, in terms of regulators. They look at us, as some of the discussion before the session tonight officially kicked off. What is it we're defined by in Part 97? And it is by our ability to serve the public. And that's something we need to get back to. So the overarching message tonight, before I turn it back to Sid, is think of ways of outreach, both through traditional media, and by traditional media, I mean what we used to think of, newspapers, broadcast radio, broadcast television, but much more increasingly through social media, opportunities to let the public know who we are and what it is we do. I'll leave you with a final statistic. The 2019 ARRL annual report was published recently. Its publication was delayed because of pandemic restrictions and some auditing. But in there, on page 5 of that report, is the total value of time contributed and recorded by ARRLs as to what was donated to the general public. And these were only the reports that were confirmed. We know that not every section got a report in, and the number publicly is $14 million. In other words, taxpayers throughout the United States did not have to pay $14 million to replicate communication services that were donated by amateur radio operators, both in terms of their labor and time and in terms of the equipment they own and maintain. We know that if we add in all the sections that didn't report, coupled with our sister response organizations like American Red Cross, Salvation Army, and other faith-based groups, that number may get closer to $40 to $50 million. And that is something that we need to let the public know as to what our benefit is. And we can't do it alone at headquarters. It's something that we require all 457 appointed PIOs in the field to take the initiative. And part of what we do on the PRC is trying to make sure that we give the resources and the tools to the PIOs in the field so that they can respond and make sure that a positive message is getting out. Sid, that's what it is. I've kind of blown my 2 cents on this. I'll turn it back to you. NH7C, N2COP, over.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to send it over to Angel and for a couple of his comments, then over to Ed, and then we'll talk a little bit about social media, and then we'll have some time for some questions. Or if you have some questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll take a look at them, see if we can come up with an answer. So, Angel, what do you have for us tonight?
You need to unmute, Angel. Here we go.
Okay, thank you. And if you hear some kind of background, it's that my mother is here in the room and she's watching TV. So sorry for if you have hearing something in the background. Well, I've been here in the committee for almost 5 years. Maybe you have seen some kind of emphasis was approached 10 years ago to try to translate the field day rules, just the rules. And after almost 10 years, the package has been entirely translated. Uh, I think I don't remember if I did mention this before, but initially it was going to be for, okay, to help hearing people in Puerto Rico for the language. But many do understand the rules in English when they do field day. And I thought, well, what if we could help all those amateurs, prospect amateurs that maybe do not have the meaning of the English language, but maybe they would like to make some kind of activities. So I think the field day would be one of those kind of activities. Also, there's a small fact that comes out on the first paragraph of the rules. That field day is open to all region 2. Region 2 of IARU is North, Central, South America. So could be interesting to invite all those other people. I've not. Have you ever read of QST, the results of field day? They have been a sidebar of all those other countries, including Philippines, including Turkey. Repair protected in field day. So I think we're getting more and more. Even though field day is almost domestic, maybe we're going somewhat international. I don't know if you have the experience also. I'm getting off of this the line, but if you work field day, maybe there are many day stations that come out and want to work. Maybe they want to test the equipment, the propagation, or we want to be part of field day, and maybe they confirm. Maybe they're new hands, and that's the open window, and so to make contact. So this is part of amateur radio. Emphasis has been we're trying to also promote World Amateur Radio Day. The thing is that field day is our most important day in all the sections, but we're trying in some way to promote uh, World Amateur Radio Day to the Americas, because that is a big day in other parts of the world. There's some stations I've seen from Central America, some from the Caribbean, some from South America that have special event stations commemorating World Amateur Radio Day. Also in Spain, in other parts of the world, they commemorate that day. In Puerto Rico, we have the distinction that we have our own day, the Puerto Rico Amateur Radio Operator Day. In Spanish, Día del Radio Aficionado, which is by law always the second Tuesday on May, by law. Law number 7 of 1990, 95, 96, 1996. So we could over here celebrate here our day, first on April, then our day, and then field day, 3 months in a row. Interesting, right? Uh, Also, I could about other responsibilities. When I took the first as PIO, and then what?
Oh, looked like Angel got all frozen up. We might have lost them. Okay, well, we'll pick that back up. So I'll shoot it over to Ed, WX2R. He's someone who has tons and tons of experience and has his hands both in new media and I'll just say the other media,
The other media,
experienced
right.
media.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. So I just to pick up a lot, I mean, both Sid and Bill have really done, I think, a really good overview in terms of really where the committee is heading in the next year, just in terms of building on stuff that we did in 2020. Now, I'll just add really a couple of points, just a couple of embellishments here. Is that one, as I think really, I think part of the focus for this committee as well, too, this year, is really sort of strengthening the sort of upstairs, downstairs look in terms of communications, in terms of flow. Sort of picture us being in the middle between what's going on in Newington in terms of setting the direction for the for a communications plan going forward, and then being able to sort of honcho that and put it down into the field so that we're all we're all, I think, better communicated with, and we've got a better sense in terms of what's going on in the field. One of the things that I think we've noticed also in the last year is that, particularly for somebody, I came out of media, spent about 35, 40 years and still consult in it, is that we tend to think of ourselves in terms of sections, and divisions. And, the media world is really broken into designated media markets. And as I think we found is that some markets have gotten a lot better coverage than other markets have. And the composite view is that, in a sense, we could do a better job in terms of how we get our message out. And that'll be one of the things that I think we're going to look to see, how we might be able to better communicate in some of the markets that have been underrepresented. Good story in the last week. I don't know how many of you saw the LA Times story in terms of looking at amateur radio in terms of the International Space Station. I mean, top 5 market. And that story got picked up and really moved around. And that's a really good example in terms of things that can be done. The other thing I'll just add very, very quickly, is just going back to Sid's point too, in terms of sort of looking at the contemporaneity in terms of what we do. Certainly ham radio has changed very, very much. If just look in the last 20 years, things that we're doing now that we had no conception of what we'd be doing, at this particular point. And the same is true with media. I came out of an old newspaper background. Where I started in media is a lot different than where I came out in terms of looking at the types of media that are available. Every business today is a media company. Your club and your association is a media company. And so, what we're trying to do is to really sort of make it more contemporary. I was a PIO back in the mid 80s, early 90s. And when I came back as a PIC, I guess maybe 5-6 years ago, I was really quite surprised the fact that the job description hadn't really much changed. And the fact is that the media world has changed, and certainly, our position has changed in terms of who we are as amateurs. So, trying to put that together and sort of make it more relevant, not only to ourselves in terms of how we communicate, but also to our media partners, whether they be traditional or whether they be social media partners, untraditional, non-traditional, I think is the direction that we're looking to go as well. So, Sid, that's all for me here, and let me turn it back to you. WX2R, back to net.
Yes, and as they do on Newsline, I will say that this tonight is sponsored by my friend Fred, W8LLY, who saw the announcement for this meeting. He and I hadn't had a chat in a while, and we were able to get a couple emails back and forth. So it's always good to see Fred, and I see him listed on here. So good evening. All right, and November Hotel 7 Charlie for identification. All right, let's see. I see Gordon, one of our other committee members. Gordon, do you have anything for the group that you'd like to share?
Am I on? That's the question.
Oh, you're on.
Okay. I don't really have anything to share right now, Sid. I got in a little bit late and just playing catch up. But, I think you're hitting all the points that need to be hit.
Okay, good, good. And I don't know if Angel made it back. I don't know if he was done with his comments. Angel, did you have anything else you wanted to share with the group before we move on to social media?
And mute.
Yeah, we got you on mute there. All right, we'll come back because, yeah, not a problem. All right, well, good. Well, some of the big push from 2020 from the Public Relations Committee was really taking a good look at social media and to see what social media can do. It would seem that just like anything else, there are some people who get it right away and understand how it can be used. And then there's other people, well, that's not their day job and they know they want to do more. And then there's some people that just say, hey, that's too much for me. So what we were trying to do last year and we'll continue this year is to make sure that the social media is something that we're going to cover and do some more outreach because it is important. And I just think of all this. A few years ago, we didn't even know how to spell these words. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my favorite, Pinterest, I'm on there, NH7C, look at me. I don't know that I have many pictures, but things like TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat. I teach youth sports here in the DC metro area. And just as a coach, I have to know what these things are. And so the idea of looking into them, seeing how they work, I find very interesting. We've got a couple on our committee who have helped with the outreach and really been able to even go one-on-one with some of our PIOs and PICs to do more with the media platforms. Of course, some of those are aimed like TikTok. That's probably not something that's on my first look of the day, but I'm definitely looking at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. During field day, Craig Fugate, the former FEMA director, was responding to our messages and talking back and forth with us on Twitter during field day, and so it's some really interesting, and especially when we think about the promotion of the hobby and getting new people in and retaining those people in the hobby. clubs need to be involved, and club leadership and even section leadership, divisions, everybody needs to check it out and be well versed. You might not be the person that makes the posts. You might be the person that approves the posts or thinks about the ideas. So that's one of the best ways, and we've heard from a lot of our media contacts that they're looking in certain areas. Not everybody looks in the same area, but very few people go by the traditional press release. And even the name press release can be dated to some. Maybe it's a media release now. Every market's a little different, as Ed mentioned, and they all have their unique desires to get information from the amateur radio community. So we're going to hit those on a lot of our calls. We're going to start in January, so I'll make sure that everybody knows. Steve Ewald's been doing a great job with getting the messaging out to section leadership, and we've got some of our mailing lists, and of course on the public relations side, we've got a reflector that Bill mentioned. We've got 450 or 500 people that are on there. So we share that information, and as I said earlier, all will be welcome to join us. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what questions we have, but I'll also look to see if people have questions now. I'm going to quit sharing my screen. And
I took your screen down there so that
oh,
everybody can see you.
Thank you. Okay.
Before you do that, Sid, I want to, there's been a lot of people doing chat, a lot of questions in chat, and Sid, get to those in a second. And if you haven't been doing chat and you don't know about it, I want you to, when you look at your participants, which is now 74, at the bottom of that list, you can raise your hand. That raise your hand gets our attention, we'll see you and call upon you. So there's two ways, the chat, and then of course through raising your hand. Sid, take it back. You got it.
Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna have to look through 3 pages to see who's got their hand up. See if there's any hand.
I can watch that. That's not a problem.
Okay, good, good. All right, well, we'll take a look at some of the questions here that we've got. I'll start at the top. See what. All right, so Dan, Whiskey Lima 7, Charlie Oscar Oscar, says, anybody keeping in contact with Congress, members of the FCC, about trained radio emergency services operators to the local emergency management authorities at all levels of government when the unexpected does happen and their comm resources are needed? I do know that with our new emergency management director at headquarters, that he's in contact and he's on numerous groups with the different federal, state, and local partners. And I noticed that in one of my last QSTs, there was an article with some information that he had. And I'm sure as he gets deeper and deeper into the position, that we'll see more and more information. We do pass that information along to headquarters, both for when we hear about things, whether it's for inclusion on QST in the news section, or if it needs to go to a particular office within headquarters, but we do share that information, and we know that people receive our emails and acknowledge those back. So the idea of keeping on that idea that there's a resource here, that's something that I know that we as the Public Relations Committee understand and share with our partners, but also with other folks there at headquarters. Bob Innerbitson's been doing a lot of work to get a bunch of great information out as he helps us and helps our committee. Anybody else from our committee have a comment on that? All right.
Sid?
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, just to that question
Can
specifically.
you take,
There's 2 forms of official outreach to Washington representatives. We have a board level LAC, which stands for Legislative Advocacy Committee, that is headed by the West Gulf Division Director, John Stratton, N5AUS, November 5, Alpha United Sierra. And he heads up a team of other directors and vice directors, and even there's a section manager on there. And their goal is to work specifically with Congress and various federal executive agencies. And also representing us in Washington is our counsel, David Sadal, K3JZ, Kilo 3 Juliet Zulu, former FCC attorney himself. So we've got that waterfront covered. What we don't have covered is the translation of those efforts out into the field through our field PIO force. So I think that's something we hope to work on much more assiduously in 2021.
Great. Thanks, Bill, for that added information. All right. I noticed that Caleb had a comment. He's somebody that we met through our beginning of the year outreach, and he continued on with us through field day, and he's got a note in there about things going on in Mississippi and how some of his efforts are coming to fruition. So we're glad to hear that. Thanks for the update. Diana mentions that many of the ARRL folks are looking at keeping track of their hours in case there's FEMA or state reimbursement. And especially if you're serving a community, and the community has a 25% cost share, which is a regular cost share with FEMA after a major declaration, a major disaster declaration, or an emergency declaration. So it's always good to keep track of those hours. I'm glad somebody put the answer in there, because I can't keep a track of all the changes when that every year it seems to be a different number. Okay, next is from John, November Sugar 6 X-ray. How does a PIO, PIC let headquarters know and the committee know they've been involved in an event disaster, have provided their services? That's a good question. There on the website, there's a media hits page that has a lot of the contact information. A call to headquarters is the quickest way to get some attention, even though we're in COVID, and for the longest time Connecticut was shut down, people were still staffing the phones, and that was good. And we always share our information. We're always looking forward to that. We are at a little disadvantage because we don't have the replacement for Dave Isker, who is the ARRL communications manager. That should happen soon, and then that'll be much smoother. But all of those mailboxes are monitored, and then of course the phones are answered there at headquarters. But we'll make sure. That's a good point. We'll make sure that we have that information out. Maybe there's a special extension that we can have monitored there at headquarters. All right, let's see. All right, Diana's got some more information about the Washoe Nation reservations and the Emergency Operations Center. Then there's a question about field day reports. Oh yeah, especially with my past experience and current experience with tribes. Diana, I'll want to talk to you offline so we can talk about that, see if we can get that solved. Okay, this Jim, the social media guide. Oh, let's see if Bill has that answer about the section manager social media guide. I know that we try to have those updated for the board meetings in January and in July. Bill, is there a distribution for that?
At this time, Sid, the social media guide was initially developed as a reporting device to board members as to ARRL's extent of active numbers of posts and engagement on the 5 platforms in which ARRL participates. And those 5 are Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And already the new CEO, David Mister, NA2AA, has already seen that ARRL's presence on YouTube is understated, and that's an area in which he would like to move. For those who are on here tonight, I really encourage that you, of all the platforms, that you try to engage the main ARRL Facebook page. Right now, nationally, we have just shy of 90,000 people who are following that. And that's actually quite a low number when you consider there's 755,000 licensed amateurs in the United States. That means that really almost 1 in 9 are following it. It's a great way to get the word out. The other thing on the media guide is the use of particularly hashtags and ligatures. Ligatures is the fancy formal name for that @ sign. And Sid, to answer your question, I don't know what the status is of a social media field guide for field PIOs. The version that we've been working on is the one that's really a semi-annual report for the members of the board. I think there would be a logical adaptation to take that and make it available to our field PIOs.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. All right, so Steve, Kilo X-ray 4 Echo Fox asked, what's the conduit to the national markets? And I would say, and this is a, like they say in real estate, location, location, location. For this, it's relationships, relationships, relationships. On another call, we'll have Gordon go into how he gets into television stations. He has, if it's in the morning, he's got a big box of donuts and he gets there 20 minutes before all the morning people and he has the donuts and he gets invited in. If it's lunchtime or dinner time, he brings pizzas and he gets in there and gets his message through. But a lot of it is, it is about relationships, and that's what we're hoping to do is build the confidence in our PIOs and PICs and then our section leadership to make sure that they have the ability and the desire to go out there and find the media people that they'll need to talk to. We can be a great resource as the committee or even the larger group of PIOs and PICs, but if we don't have a relationship with somebody, they're not going to trust our messaging. And so whether that's working with the county or the state with their emergency operations center and with their joint information center, if it's that big of an event, and learning who all the movers and shakers are. And I'll ask Ed for some of his perspective.
I think, yeah, thanks, Sid. In fact, I was going to chime in because Steve, it's a really good question. And as Sid has pointed out, I mean, a good part of it has to do with relationships. The other thing is really, in a sense, to a couple of earlier points, is how media has changed. Is that, if you're looking at a national story, I mean, the Nashville story from the weekend, California wildfires, to your point, I mean, those are big national stories, and certainly managing editors and editors at the major news organizations are going to be pretty well aware of that. Okay, and I guess in the older days, with radio and television stations, they use their affiliates, for a lot of that information that came from downstream, in the smaller markets that sort of drove it as national stories. In many respects today, as media's changed, that's a little bit of an easier job today for some of the major media companies. Companies like Gannett and the old Tribune companies, because they own so many properties, and the flow of information is far better than it was, when a lot of media organizations were independent and competed with each other. And that, I think, is a real good opportunity for us on our local markets. To Sid's point, is really having a good relationship with people at the local level who, when a really good story comes up, not necessarily, on the scope of, say, Nashville or a California fire, but a good general interest story that, that talks about the value of amateur radio. That's something that if it's picked up in a Gannett market such as Asbury Park, it can move very, very quickly through their chain and get a lot more exposure. The other thing that I think really sort of ties it all together, Steve, to your question, is that, and Bill mentioned it earlier, is the fact that if we're doing a good job of communicating about what amateur radio is, okay, to generations that aren't necessarily as familiar okay, with people who've grown up with it like we have, 2-3 generations of sort of amateur radio operators. It's that good communication built, tied together with a relationship, that when a good story, whether it's a breaking story or whether it's a great human interest story, okay, has a better chance of being able to move around, not only from Alpena, Michigan, but also has a chance to be able to make it on the morning news or the national news. So anyway, Sid, back to you, okay? Hope that's helpful, Steve.
All right, thanks, Ed. I'm going to see what else we had. Okay, Angel wanted to make sure his final comments were going to be about it, when you're PIO, PIC, it's not just about waiting for somebody to call or send you an email or contact you on the repeater. It's an active job. As I mentioned, Gordon's out there with the donuts and the pizzas, and especially when there are incidents, and Oscar knows this, and Angel knows this, and Puerto Rico's been very busy with disasters. And so the idea of it's almost an everyday occurrence. I'm glad that things have slowed down a little bit, but it's an everyday occurrence, and you have to go out there and search for the information that you need, whether it's to help your supported agency, or if it's just to share information, health and welfare type information for the amateur radio community. You've got to go out there and find it. You got to do it. You got to have those relationships. Okay, John's got a question. Where do we find the main accounts for the ARRL? I posted a link to the media page, but you can also go to arrl.org and hit media/PR. It'll take you to the same location. That's got some of that information with the where the league's at there. Okay. Let me see what else we have here. Yeah, some good answers from some people on the questions. Yeah, good. All right, some good comments. All right, and well, good. I think we went through all the questions. If some other questions come up, or you'd like one of us from the PR committee to get a little more in depth with what your situation is with your club or your section, or one of the aspects of or facets of your section, be happy to talk with you more. You can email me at November Hotel 7 Charlie at arrl.net, or Sid, S-I-D, at NovemberHotel7Charlie.com. Be happy to take your email, set up a time to have a chat, whether it's just on the phone or if it is on the video teleconference. Happy to do it in Zoom or GoToMeeting. So good. I hope I didn't miss any questions, but Dan, I'll send it over to you.
All right. I think you did a great job. Appreciate it very much, sir, Sid.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I think we'll have to have more opportunities in the future going in. One of the things I might comment on, we are finding, as you are, that social media like this, Zoom and GoToMeeting, that thing, is a great way to have meetings and get to know people and get to engage with people. When you're working with a group, especially across the United States, before we just had snail mail and all that kind of stuff. In today's technology, these guys do not need to be out there alone, and you guys can work with a team that puts it all together. Okay, I don't see anybody holding their hand up in the participants' places there. Are there any more? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that when the PIOs and the PICs, when there was a real incident and there was a joint information center open, that the amateur radio PIOs go through the PIOs and the PICs in charge when they're making media contacts. It's very important, though. We can get into a lot of trouble.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
Very important.
Okay, any more comments out there? Any more questions? Any answers? Okay, I think we've had a good session tonight. Thank you, Sid. It's been good. Good turnout. Enjoy hearing from your team there also. That's great. You got a good team you're working with. Turn it back to you, Sid, see if you got anything else to say, and then we'll close her out.
All right, on behalf of our Public Relations Committee team and the members that could join us tonight, we are really appreciative to get out all of this great information and answer some questions, talk more about it. And we look forward to your participation next year with us. And we look forward to hearing more from the sections and from the clubs as to how we can be helpful. I know we do have a new CEO at the ARRL, and I'm sure that we'll be getting some more information, especially when we have the July board meeting. So, well, we might have some new and interesting things to share. But as always, Dan, I really appreciate your friendship, and I really like working with your groups. You got a bunch of different groups. You got a bunch of people doing a bunch of wonderful things, promoting the hobby and getting new people involved, and the people who are already involved, getting them excited to keep the excitement going. So our committee would like to wish everybody a happy new year. And once again, thank you for this opportunity.
Quite welcome there, Sid. And I might comment, it's a two-way street. If we can help you, let us know. We'll make arrangements to make that happen, however you need, whatever your needs are. Well, together we work as a team to make all this thing work.